when you start looking at this Week 3 matchup between the Bears and the Falcons, you could sit there and make a strong argument that these are two teams heading in totally divergent directions. The Bears at 2-0, off to a good start. In theory, based off of the record, certainly a win is a win, no matter how you get it, by hook or by crook. They're starting to think about potentially being a playoff team this year. Whereas the Atlanta Falcons come in at 0-2, and especially with the disaster that happened in the second half last week against Dallas, you're thinking about how long is it going to be until Dan Quinn loses his job? Is he actually going to make it through the season? And are the Falcons heading on a trajectory to nowhere very, very quickly? Well, when you look at the records, you could certainly make that argument. Now, the interesting thing about that is, though, is you look at the Bears, and you can't exactly say you've been impressed by their 2-0 start. Not only have the teams that they've played stink in the Lions and Giants, respectively, you could certainly make the argument that the Bears' offense isn't setting the world on fire, and the defense has been, for a lot of people that wanted to believe for some reason that this defense was going to be elite this year, they have been underwhelming, to say the least. Whereas the Falcons have had to take on two legitimate playoff teams to start off the year, and potentially two Super Bowl contenders in the NFC, in the Seattle Seahawks and the Dallas Cowboys. So you ask the question, what happens if the Falcons started off their season against the Lions and the Giants? And what happens if the Bears started off their season against the Seahawks and the Cowboys? You might be coming into this thinking about it entirely differently. And that's probably part of the reason why, going into the Sunday's game, the Falcons are 3.5-point favorites. I certainly understand it. Because while the Bears are 2-0, and they've got dramatic victories over the Lions and the Giants, reality is they're 2 plays away from just as easily being 0-2. And while in terms of the running game, they're top 10 through 2 games, small sample size granted, in terms of rushing yards per game and rushing yards allowed per game, still, same old story on the offensive side of the ball. Struggles with consistently moving the ball in passing game, 28th in yards a game on the offensive side of the ball. And defensively, they're getting hit up a little bit in the secondary. They're 20th in the league in passing yards allowed. Whereas you look at the Falcons, like I said, they were dominated by the Seahawks in week 1, but they've got an MVP candidate, Russell Wilson. They look to be legit. And then last week, 29-10, they're up at halftime against the Cowboys. You're thinking, okay, this is a nice statement victory for the Falcons, early season momentum builder, and then all of that didn't happen. And they had yet another epic collapse. Now, somebody like a Charles Barkley saying this is an even worse collapse than the Super Bowl, the 28-3 collapse, and you say, what the hell are you smoking? This is a week 2 game against the Cowboys. The other one was the Super Bowl. Ain't nothing worse than that, period. But it feels like a repeat, really, of the same story of last year when the team got off to that 1-7 start. Matty Ice in the passing game doing big things oftentimes because they don't have any choice. Struggling some in the running game still, even with bringing Todd Gurley into the fold. And defense doing okay against the run, but absolutely getting shredded in their secondary in the passing game. 31st in the league in passing yards allowed a game. And when you look at them defensively overall, this is another thing where Matty Ice really becomes a somewhat sympathetic figure because you're talking about, this offense is putting up a lot of points. This offense is putting this team in a position to win. It most certainly did in week 2, last Sunday against the Cowboys. But you've given up 38 and 40 points, respectively, in the first 2 weeks of the season. I don't care how good your offense is. You're just not going to win many games in the National Football League allowing that many points to be scored on you. You're just not. But what happens if the Falcons would have played the Lions and the Giants the first 2 weeks of the season? So you talk about this matchup, and if you just paid attention to the records and the records alone, it would tell you a vastly different story than potentially what the reality could be. Because the reality could be is sometimes you get situations, unfortunate situations, and you get put in a good spot, and the Bears, by the schedule makers, got put in a good spot early on in this season, and to their credit, they have found a way the first 2 weeks to capitalize on that. When they haven't played so well. And you could make an argument, certainly, that that's what good teams do. But, when you say good and you're thinking like maybe a 10-6 football team that gets into the wild card and loses, what are we talking about here? But big game on Sunday for both teams because if the Falcons have any delusions about trying to be a playoff team, if any delusions of saving their coach's job, any delusions of actually making a competitive, viable season out of it, they must win Sunday. That is not hyperbole. That is not exaggeration. That is not sensationalistic. That is just fact. And as far as the Chicago Bears go, I can come up with all the statements and the doubting that I want to, but 3-0 is 3-0. And 3-0 historically puts you on a pretty good trajectory for the playoffs. You can only play the teams that you're scheduled, and you take advantage of whatever situation you are put into or given. So it is also a very big win, a chance for a Bears team to validate themselves a little bit based off of what's happened the first 2 weeks of the year. Now, when you talk about keys to success for the game, I think offensively, first, you got to get Trubisky moving. Get him on the move early. Like, I want him to run some. I want him to roll out, draw up some bootlegs, some play action. Get him out and going, because it always seems to me that Trubisky gets more comfortable in the game and gets into a better rhythm in the game when he's on the move early. It just seems to engage him differently. It gets him relaxed. It gets him more comfortable. It gets him into a place where he's more instinctually reacting versus analyzing and thinking, because we should all know as Bears fans, or any fan in general, that when Trubisky has to analyze and think, that spells trouble for the Chicago Bears in that offense. And then he can't just play it close to the vest offensively. Your defense has not played that well the first 2 weeks, and now you're going up by far the best offense you have faced so far this year. You have to score some points offensively. You must assume that you're going to have to get in the 20s like a big boy offense does, if not potentially the 30s, which means you can't play it close to the vest offensively. Let's see some goddamn creativity. Let's see you take some chances. Let's see you take some shots, and especially down the field early with Darnell Mooney. Like the 5th-round pick from Tulane brings an element that was severely lacking the last 2 years to this Bears offense. That is speed. That is explosiveness, burst, quickness. Take a shot down the field to Mooney early, and then do it again. Maybe Trubisky overthrows him by 10 yards. Maybe he throws a pick. But maybe you get a field position changing pass interference penalty. Maybe Mooney makes a big play and gives your offense a lot of momentum on the road early. Either way, there is absolutely no justification for not trying to take a deep shot or two with Mooney in the first quarter to first quarter and a half of this game. And if they do that, some potentially big things could be set up later on down the road. And I look at their approach defensively. I get Trevathan the hell out of the game. He sucks. And the fact that Pace gave him a long-term contract extension was just dumb. What an idiotic move. Because the Bears are getting torched over the middle. What I'm saying is that the Bears need to play the pass. Force the Falcons to run. I do not want Matty Ice, Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley beating me. And even if you say, well, Calvin or Julio Jones may be a game-time decision. Well, that's great and all, but Ridley would still torch them. Or knowing the dumbass Bears in their franchise's history, Russell Gage will go off and have a big day. I want the Falcons to run the ball. I want to force them to run the ball, which means you cheat and overcommit to the pass and force Todd Gurley to beat you. Because if Matt Ryan is forced to beat you, he will. I don't know that you could say the same for the Falcons running game. For the Falcons, they got to look to get pressure up the middle on Trubisky, get him rattled early, and keep him in the pocket. Don't let him move. Don't let him improvise. Because when he does that, some good things can actually happen for this Bears offense. If you force him to sit back there as a pocket passer and analyze and think, that's when the Bears offense can struggle. That's when he can struggle, and that's when you can make some big things happen defensively. For the offense, you got to get Hayden Hurst involved early. The Bears have struggled the first couple of weeks. I mentioned a moment ago the struggles with defending over the middle. Trevathan is a piece of crap at this point. Get Hayden Hurst involved in this passing game early. The Lions had a little bit of success doing that with Hockenson in week 1. When the Giants started getting Evan Ingram a little bit more involved in the passing game in week 2 and lining him up all over the place, the Bears' pass defense struggled quite a bit in that second half. So as a result, get Hayden Hurst involved early. And then for them, I would say go after Kyle Fuller early and often. If Julio happens to play, go after him. If Calvin Ridley is lining up over Fuller, then go after him. And you're going to say, well, why wouldn't you go after the rookie, Jalen Johnson? I would say at this point in time, I think it would be more dispiriting to go against Kyle Fuller, because Kyle Fuller can give up some things underneath. There are good things that he does, and there are some not so good things that he does. And there are plays available on Kyle Fuller's side. So I think you actually have to go after him early, once you get the underneath passing game going to Hayden Hurst. When I look at this matchup, like I said, the records tell you one story. And reality might be slightly different. And I think that's in part why, even coming off of last week's collapse to the Cowboys, that the Falcons are still being viewed as the favorites here. And I happen to kind of agree. Because the Bears, when you look at what they've done the first couple of weeks of the season, like, they have not played well. They have not. Please don't come on here saying 2-0 means they've played well, because they have not, and you know it. Now, sometimes that's okay. You win some games when you're playing ugly early in the year, and then you figure it out as you go along. But this offense has struggled at times. This defense has struggled at times. This just feels like a really dangerous matchup for this Bears team in Week 3. So I like the Falcons here. I'm going to pick the Falcons to win. Julio, no Julio, doesn't matter. They've got the better quarterback. I trust the Falcons to be able to score more points than the Chicago Bears, and I don't think the Bears' defense is nearly as good as people want to make it out to be. And it's not so much personnel, that's coaching and scheme. So give me the Atlanta Falcons 27 and the Bears 24. You can certainly chime in the comments. Let me know who you think is going to win. If you're first time checking me out, smash that subscribe button. Smash it like it was puss. Now, it won't give you the same rewards, obviously, or in your perspective, the penalties. But nonetheless, that way you get to watch other videos from me. And isn't that pretty cool? I'll be back Sunday night to talk about what happened during Sunday's action. See you then.